And I want to just say, welcome, Rob Gardenhire. And I'm looking forward to learning your perspectives on fundraising. And as you're going through your slides, maybe you and I can chat a little bit, and I will interrupt you if we have any questions from the chat thread that seem like we should answer them right then.
Oh, it sounds great. Thanks, Wendy. And yeah, Leadership Tulsa was 2011, I think, maybe 12, but it's been a long time. Of course, we moved into the stadium with the Drillers in 2010, but really it's such a pleasure to be here with you all. And I appreciate you joining us here on a Monday and in the evening at that. So kudos to you for continuing to crush your Monday. So like Wendy said, today we're going to be talking about contributed income and how, as a board member, you can help with that. And we'll go into all that here in a bit. But this title was given to me by my faithful colleague around the way here, Johnny Bouchard. Johnny has worked with Wendy to set all this up with us, and we're privileged to be a part of Leadership Tulsa and taking this message out from Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits. So resource development isn't just asking for money. So we're going to get into it right off the get-go here. So who am I? Just a little bit of background. Wendy kind of hit some of that. This is my daughter, by the way, my 16-year-old, who is pretty much the last time we talked was on New Year's Eve. So if any of you have 16-year-olds, you know what I mean. But no, but that is Emma. But I've come from a teaching background, landed with the Drillers in professional sports in 2008. So that's when I moved to Tulsa, and did that for about 10 years, almost to the day, and then went to USA BMX and was part of bringing money to their table to get that project off the ground, which was a visions project. We had to do a little extra fundraising for, so that's really where I earned my stripes in the fundraising world and city politics and all of those good things. But if you haven't been by the FinTube site, they are erecting that thing at a breakneck pace. So that should be a really cool project for Tulsa. But on top of, I do lead the resource development team here at the center. And I've joined a great team in August, really the last day of August, so really September, I joined that team. So I'm almost, I guess I am 6 months in now as of today. So really been a pleasure, a breath of fresh air for me. And has just been awesome to reconnect in a statewide role, which I've never really had. I've done national with BMX and regional with the Drillers and Roughnecks, but I've never really had a statewide role. And so this has been a lot of fun for me. I've met a lot of amazing people doing awesome work in the nonprofit sector and changing their communities for the good. So there's my contact information. I did share it in the chat earlier, but Wendy reminded me that if you weren't on when I shared it, you won't be able to see it. So if you want to jot it down, feel free to reach out at any time. And if I don't have the answer, I'll certainly go find it, or I'll connect you with the person on our staff who can get that done. And as Wendy said, we have an amazing staff, and we have a huge programs and consulting team that does the lion's share of this work from a training side. But we all do really train. I jumped in and did a fundraising summit, kind of a fundraising 101 here a couple of weeks ago. And so it's, again, I'm excited to be here talking about board work and all the things. I'll use a lot of examples of what we do. I think we've got a pretty good plan. It's not the only plan. And I'm sure that you have, being a part of boards in the Tulsa area, that you have witnessed some of these things. And so hopefully we'll get the questions going and get started. So just quick on the agenda. So really we're gonna, just jump in as a board member. How can you support the mission of your organization? What your role is? Talk a little bit about the fundraising cycle. I think it's important for board members to understand this and maybe dispel some of the myths that go along with this. And then talk about how to ask. I mean, it's not just about asking for money, but at some point you do have to ask for money. And hopefully we can show you some ways, or I can show you some ways that will make it easier. Because if you just go in and ask for money, it's never going to work unless you just get lucky. So doing some of the things in the fundraising cycle that will take place, or that should take place, can really make that ask a heck of a lot easier. And then we'll talk about, just some things that as board members you can do. So I am a board member. I've chaired a board before. I've served on a number of boards. I'm a current board member with the Oklahoma Center for Community and Justice, an organization that I go back with a long way. So I am in your shoes, and but I also get to raise money. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So, as a board member, really you get to not stand on the sidelines, but be a part-time participant in supporting the mission of your organization. And hopefully you haven't gotten involved with the boards that you're involved with, by having your arm twisted. You support the cause, you enjoy the mission, believe in the mission of that organization, and want to go out into the community and find folks who will help you support that mission. And that's really at the crux of what this is. We really truly believe that, at the bottom here, it talks about friend raising. People don't give to organizations, they give to people. And I think that's so important. So as board members, as we go recruit new board members, as our current board members with the center go recruit new board members, they want to bring people in that are, that are well connected, that bring some certain expertise, but also, that they know will be key connectors for the center or for your board. And so I think that's really important. Some of the successful nonprofits really have a few things in common. One, they tend to be diverse in composition from a board standpoint and from an employee standpoint, and that can be along lines of color and sex and all those things, but it can also be along expertise. I mean, we're always trying to make sure that we have professionals on our board, who support us, but all bring expertise to the table that can really help our organization. It's almost a part-time employee sometimes. And I read a recent study that said that your volunteer hours in Oklahoma are worth about $27 an hour. So think about that. When you're asked to serve on a board, it's a serious commitment. And some boards require more time than others. Our board is very involved. Our organization, probably overdoes it maybe sometimes with the information we send to our board. But we're always thinking about that and trying to meet them in the middle with, where we feel that these individuals, these volunteers, as they really are, can help us. They have a strong and dynamic executive director. I think that's very important. That you have a great leader who's out in the community doing the things that need to be done to raise money and do those things. And they have obviously a passionate board. I mean, I think that if an organization has a deadbeat board, and I'm sure some of us maybe have been a part of those, it's really hard. I've been a part of boards where I was the only member going out and helping to raise money, and it's tough. And when you can't get folks to join in and help with supporting the board and coming to the events and volunteering and those things, it really is hard. So you need to have an active and passionate board. And then, at the end of the day, the executive director, your CEO and president, in our case, really needs to have a dynamic relationship with the board and with the board chair. We spend a lot of time on that. The center actually teaches, if you're a member of the center, you can, and you're on a board, that board's chair and the executive director or president of that organization can participate in the partnership, is what we call it, for free. And it's all about forming that great relationship between the board chair and the executive director, because it really is so important. Because a lot of times the behind the scenes work that gets done at the board level is really important to the success of the board and of the organization. So your roles as a board member, we talked a little bit about some of this, but I think the number one most important thing to consider here is that board participation in giving, so funding from the board, needs to be at 100%. I'm sure many of you have heard that. Funders ask that all the time. So you really want to make sure that your board, as a board, you're giving, whether it's $25 or $25,000, that you are supporting the organization monetarily, because that really says a lot about the support your board brings, and the employees for that matter. We have employee giving to the board or to our organization, payroll deduction, all those kind of different things that you can do. But it's so important that your employees are vested as well as the board members. So, one of the the big things that we'll talk about here in the sales cycle is identifying, potential donors. And that is so important to bringing support to the organization that you serve. Without the help of the board, again, this key connector role, it really becomes tough for the organization to continue to grow. I only know so many people. Wendy only knows so many people, but when we bring in John and Susie and Jimmy and Carol or whoever, we want those folks to go out into the community and connect with folks about the great work that your organization is doing to help us raise funds or to help us gain volunteers or serve on a committee as a non-board member. I mean, all of these things, again, $27 an hour as a volunteer, right? That's important. So if they can bring their expertise to a committee and even not even serve on the board, that works too. So we really lean on our board, and as board members, you need to be thinking about how can you be a key connector for that organization. Obviously, you need to support it. And one of the easiest ways to support it is really supporting that culture of gratitude. I mean, this is, and we'll talk a little bit about this during the cycle piece, but you really want to be the stewardship for your organization. It really impacts the relationships that nonprofits have with donors when board members are engaged like that. And they're out there thinking and seeing people at the gym. I mean, with our largest donor, we had a board member, it's our board chair, and he said, I said, hey, we just received our gift from this donor. Would you mind sending him a thank you note? He's like, oh, I see him at the gym every day. I'll just thank him there. And that's fine. So that supports that culture of gratitude. You definitely want to help lead conversations to, again, be that key connector in the community. And then, the last part really should almost be at the first. But while the boards that I've been a part of don't go out and create a fundraising plan, they can certainly help add to it and enhance it. And it's real important to play a part of that, because we have a ton of great ideas that have come from the board that support our resource development team. And so while we'll outlay the strategic plan for resource development, or here's our campaign plan for this, it's our board members and our committee members who really kind of troubleshoot that and offer some suggestions, because again, they're giving to the organization and their time and their monetary resources. And so we want to know what, really gets them going. Yes, Wendy, sorry.
Yeah, no, to that point, it's so important. So the fundraising plan and the budget have to kind of sync up also, because what's not a good thing with a board would be a board to set an unrealistic fundraising goal as part of a budget, just so that they can have all the bells and whistles in their year that they want. It has to be a really good give and take between the staff and the board about what really is realistic for that organization. And when a stretch goal gets set, the board members have to understand they're going to be a part of, helping to fulfill that as well. And it's also not fair for the board then to give the staff a goal that's unrealistic. So I think that's an open line of communication about that plan. Like, what's our methods for making this goal that we've set? And so it's supporting it, but also they're ultimately the ones through the budget who approve that fundraising plan.
Right. No, 100%. And, it was funny, and I can't remember when it was in the fall, but early on it was, Rob, we need a strategic plan for fundraising. You got a week. And I pulled it together and we presented it to the Resource Development Committee. And part of that plan was looking at our growth that one of our committees had talked about over 5 years. And my analysis was really about how if we did that, we'd have to raise an additional $500,000 this year, right? I mean, and I'm not airing our dirty laundry at all. It just, the board comes back to us with a stretch goal, as Wendy mentioned, or whatever. And then we're the ones that are really responsible for analyzing that and coming back to them and saying, okay, we could do half of this, but maybe not all of what, we're thinking. But most boards that I've been on have served on, and the one that I serve now as an employee have been, fairly receptive to that and have appreciated the analysis that the staff does. So that's real important. And I think, again, that goes back to that relationship that your executive director has with the board board and the board chair, to be able to go behind the scenes and be like, well, hey, we've looked at this. There's just no way we can do this, but we can do this instead. So no, great point, Wendy. Any questions here? Okay, pretty straightforward stuff. So I'll pose a few questions here to you. So identifying new donors, if anyone wants to just jump in and talk about how have you done this as board members, to help cultivate these relationships for your organizations? Does anybody have even an elementary way to do it? But this question goes back to everybody on the call.
If to unmute and say something, you could also use the chat thread. So Kristen says finding donors whose mission relates to ours. And one way I've done that is actually take a look at people's programs and annual reports. And, when I was in the arts, the lists of donors on different organizations, you kind of see who cares. So that's a great one, Kristen. What else? I once had a group that the board all contributed their holiday mailing lists, whatever kind of mailing list had to the annual campaign. 990s from Madison, yeah. So the 990 is the IRS form that nonprofits submit once a year, and they're available on the web, and they list donors sometimes.
You mentioned the holiday mailing list. One of the things that we saw, this is not related to this, but another good idea around holidays. During COVID, holiday parties were on the kibosh. And so we heard of organizations reaching out to the XYZ bank and say, hey, if you're not doing your holiday party, what about contributing to us this year with that budget money? Probably to my boss's chagrin, I didn't make that happen, but no, it's good. Social media groups, I'm watching the chat here too. Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And I think the matching of passions of donors to the mission of the organization is so key, because without that, that's where you meet, and then you align those values and what outcomes you can produce. And so I think that's really important in the cultivation process, to make sure that you're not just, yes, can you twist your friend's arms? Sure. For $500, $1,000, and if you have friends like Wendy, maybe $1 million. But
oh, no.
I don't have those friends. But
although no. Something else to that point is like when a board member sometimes involves their company. So sometimes your own company has some giving programs. Sometimes once you acquire that donor, they'll stay involved long after the initial board member was involved. Holiday meet and greets, that's new. Government RFPs, yeah. So Adrian, yeah, there are grants available from government resources.
Well, I think on the hosting meet and greets side here, and I'll move forward. Thank you guys for your suggestions. That's great, and gals. In terms of hosting the meet and greets, you can certainly do that. Host a happy hour, talk about what's going on. But even more important, if there's a program of the organization you're serving, bring them to that. Have them sit down and hear from the CEO, or maybe there's a testimonial from someone in the community that's been impacted by the service of your organization, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But those are really important. We have at the center, we have connection events, and one of the connections event is a member connection event where we're really trying to get members to bring other members to the table. But then there are some others where a coffee connections where we try to have our donors bring potential donors to the table to just have, they're virtual now, but to share in a coffee, share in a little fellowship, and really get to hear about the great work that we're doing, or that your organization is doing. So that's great. From a gratitude standpoint, and you can hit the chat again too, but what are some ways that you've celebrated your donors as a board member?
While they're getting their ideas in the chat, at one thing that's been fun during this time of COVID that could be something we continue is those efforts to actually deliver goodies or gift baskets, or we did little bundt cakes to our corporate partners, deliver to their door or to their office. As your event, you bring a little something special to them. Thank you notes for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, recognition, thank you notes. I mean, exactly. I mean, these are the things that are so important. I mean, you know, just again, seeing them, you know, in the pickup line at school, I guess, which has started now again out behind my house at Eisenhower. So it's been kind of fun to see activity again at schools. So, but you know, any time that you can thank folks for supporting your organization is always, you know, so nice. I think I love the social media piece too. I think that's really great because that gives something shareable by the organization. So if you thank Leadership Tulsa for, you know, coming out and speaking at your event, and Leadership Tulsa shares that, and now they're reaching out to their entire community socially. So yeah, wine. Well, everybody likes wine for sure. So that would be good. We did that to our big donors this last year as well, and that went over. That went over really well. We actually had extras, and some people were asking for the extras. So give enough, we'll give you 2 bottles, I guess. Okay. Yeah, Andrea. Hey, Andrea, how are you? Good seeing you. Sort of. I can't see anybody but Wendy, but yes, absolutely. Provide opportunities to speak, you know, to be recognized in any kind of setting is good, especially in the virtual world where we can't all get together and have people stand up and do that. I mean, having folks come in and introduce a speaker or be the speaker, we do that a lot, and it works really well. Our sector calls on Friday or excuse me, on Wednesdays are really good for that. So, okay. And then the plan. So, you know, really, if your organization does not have a fundraising plan, help them develop one very quickly. This is the behind the scenes work that gets done by your resource development person or team. I'm very lucky that we have, including myself, we now have 5 members on our resource development team, and we're a little bit larger organization staff-wise than most I've been used to. Like, I mean, OCCJ does not have a resource development team of 5 people. So I'm very lucky in that regard, but help that person maybe develop that plan if you have that expertise. And really it's a little bit of a marketing plan is really all it is. It's who are you going to target? How are you going to reach them? When are you going to reach them? Right. And then get to work on that. And then how can the board help there? And one of the things that we've done is we did board interviews that really asked of our board members to, and this is before I got here, it was about a year ago now that this happened over a few weeks, where we just created prospect lists with our donors. And that helped us to tie into that fundraising plan where we were going to engage our donors anytime we could in many of the things you've all already mentioned, the thank you notes, the FaceTime with, potential donors or even existing donors that have relationships there. So we wanted to know, where their relationships lie. How can we track all of that? We have it in an awesome searchable spreadsheet now that my tech guy has on the resource side, our grant maker has created, and it's just amazing. So every week when we get gifts, we search that spreadsheet and we email and call those board members to say, hey, Wendy Thomas gave us, $500 last week. Would you mind reaching out? And it's just a real easy way, again, to steward those folks. So if you don't have a plan, make one. If you do, support it.
So Rob, your point about your tech person who helped you create that searchable spreadsheet, that's a great example of how a board member who's maybe more tech savvy and is feeling intimidated by the fundraising cycle, there are ways to plug in with expertise you might not expect can be helpful. So having tech expertise and helping with a donor database or a searchable spreadsheet or a online payment system, those kind of things can help tremendously too.
No, and that's a great point, Wendy. Thank you. I mean, one of our board members is an HR person with an oil and gas company in Oklahoma City. He created this amazing matrix for board analysis, to where we literally had our board members fill out their expertise, the different pieces of the organization that they'd like to plug into. And it's really helped us look, okay, geographically, where are our board members? Where do we need to fill holes? Expertise. Oh, we don't have anyone on the financial side. I mean, we do, but I'm using that as an example. But like, we have no one on the financial side that would really help us in budgeting, and creating maybe a fundraising plan. We have no marketing, so it helps you look at your gaps, and it's a really cool tool. We just launched with our board at the last board meeting, and it's been very effective for us as we start. We have some board members. We've had some resign over the last year or so, just due to life happening and COVID and retirement. And then we're rolling off a few board members. So we're in the, we're looking for potential board members and want to help fill those gaps. So yeah, Wendy, thank you for bringing that up. We've definitely leaned on him to create that for us. Okay, any other questions here? Sorry, I kind of bailed on the last question in step 3, but all right. So the fundraising cycle, here we go. This is what I spent all day in Fundraising 101 on, and there's more pieces than these 3 pieces for sure. But if you really want to get down to it, these are really the 3 things you need to do as a fundraiser or as a board member to help raise funds to bring in money and support to your organization. And by the way, Wendy mentioned contributed income versus earned income. The Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits is really unique in that we have a ton of programs where our earned income is a little bit higher maybe than most nonprofits. We're about a 65-35 split between contributed income, which of course I lead, and then in our earned income from programs and different things that our members pay to attend and get the trainings that we offer. And so, but I mean, our CEO, Marnie Taylor, she toured the Little Lighthouse the other day, and they are 100% contributed income, 100. And they have to raise millions of dollars every year to operate the way that they operate. It's really an amazing place. If you've never been over there, I have not, but the story was just unbelievable. So, it really is, it's so important to have this contributed income, and probably more important in a lot of organizations than it is in ours. It still is a huge focus. I mean, obviously we have 5 employees dedicated to the task of it, but we have, a larger programs team that takes care of, all the earned income that we receive through the classes and things. But anyway, I don't want to go on about the center, but that just gives you an example of that. So really the very first thing that we talked about, one of the first slides, is identify. That's really the first, or qualify, identify and qualify in the fundraising cycle. You want to find people whose giving affinities match with your mission. And so that's number 1, obviously. And then you get into the cultivate. And if you are, doing the cultivation the way that you should do the cultivation, you're really going to have a very easy time making the ask. And we'll get to the ask next, but the cultivation is really about taking them to that coffee connection and, getting them information, the elevator pitch, right, of your organization, or the elevator speech. So there's tons of things that you can do in the cultivation phase to prime the donor for, giving eventually. I think one of the most important things to do is to listen. A lot of times, because we are taxed for time, especially if you're a small board and you've got a fundraising department of 1, and the minute we get a meeting, we just go in and throw up all this information, give them 600 sheets, and then ask them for money. And while that may work if they're current supporters of your organization, really that cultivation is about talking about what they're focused on right now and where they're going. You ask more questions in the cultivation phase than you talk. And so I think that's really important that you do that. In the for-profit world, we call it a needs assessment. I'm trying to sell you advertising. I want to find out what you like to do, what's working for you, and how I can take what we have and make that happen. But now it's, where are you guys focused? What's going on? So that cultivation phase is very important to finding out. A lot of funders' gears have shifted due to COVID. And, it's harder I think it's harder to find new funding than it is to retain existing funding. And that's just true in general. But it's even become more so now because it can't just be about a relationship, probably. You have to really, cultivate, find where their passions lie, and then try to, connect the dots between that. So, the stewardship piece, obviously the stewardship piece comes after the ask, because that stewardship piece is really one of the easiest ways for boards to engage with donors. It's that thank you. There's, I don't need to go in. We've already kind of talked about a number of ways that you can thank donors, but that piece is so important. And I just want to get that across, is that if that's all you can do as a board member, because you're taxed and you got, 3 kids and a family and 2 jobs or whatever the case may be, if you can sit down and write thank you notes, or go to meetings, go to some of these cultivation meetings with the CEO or the resource development person on your staff at your organization, it really is impactful, because they see that the board is actively supporting the organization that you're on the board of. So that's really important. And then the ask, again, the ask is, in some ways, if you're doing the cultivation right, is the easiest part. And we'll talk about that next. But Wendy, are you seeing anything there? I need to, anybody chiming in? I see some chats here.
No, actually me just emphasizing points that you're making. And I was just going to mention, even a board member being there, like as a staff person, I'm perfectly capable of doing a tour of my leadership center. But if I have a board member there, sometimes they can spur some of that conversation and ask some of those questions that help us understand, what the needs and interests and shared mission might be. And also they can just speak from their own perspective about why they care about the organization. And that speaks volumes to a donor.
Absolutely. And the other piece too, you can match up the board member with the industry that the donor is coming from. I think if you're bringing in an oil and gas person to tour Leadership Tulsa, you bring in an oil and gas board member, or a oil and gas, leadership, class 48 person that can really talk about why they help fund, the organization, and that it helps. We were talking to a bank the other day, my CEO and I, a new prospect, as Wendy said in the chat, and they're like, well, how can a bank help you guys? And really just, getting down to it was a great conversation, and we were able to answer the question. But again, the way that people can help is by volunteering their time or sending their money. But, there's more to it than that. Here's what we can give back to you. Here's the things that we can do for your organization. Here's the recognition that we can give you. Here's the speaking opportunities, as Andrea said, I think. Those are all things that go into this. So yeah, absolutely. So basically what Wendy's doing in the chat, I see now, is just making me sound smarter than I am. So
is that true? Your point though about, that it's a mutual benefit for a donor. So often we're intimidated to ask a donor for money because it feels like we're the only one getting anything. But really, if you think about it, whether it's the tangible sorts of things that sometimes come along with a gift that are fun or good for the company or good for the company's employees, or help the foundation meet their stated mission, there's also that opportunity to be involved with making our city, our world a better place. And I often liken it to asking someone to come to a party. If you're throwing a party, and Rob, I invited you over, and you might have other plans that night, you might just not fit, there might be a million reasons why you aren't going to come to my party, but you're never going to be offended that I asked you to my party.
Right.
I hope.
Yeah. No, I think the easy, don't know, cold calling, which is kind of how I cut my teeth in the sales world, which is really what we're talking about. Sales and fundraising, I think, are the same thing, and a little bit shorter cycle on the sales side sometimes, depending on the product. But you know, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to get a no. And you know, I've always just kind of said next and moved on. And it's okay to have a no, because guess what? The minute you get the no, you start the process over again. You've already identified them. You've already qualified them. You know they can give you money. Now you just start that cultivation again. And so that whole process, you know, maybe you learned that the no came because their budgets hit in August, and you're asking them for money in January, and they're just already spent out. I will say, you know, as if you're going to actively go out and pursue resources for your organization on the development side, find that question out, find out when that budget is. And I'm going to lose track of my thought here, but you know.
But we've got a good question from the chat. Going to be saved from your thought there. Trey asks, how do you and Rob deal with donor fatigue? I have experienced this as a donor at certain nonprofits. So I'm thinking that either the same nonprofit is going back to the well over and over again. I've also heard from donors, board members sometimes, that if they ask their friends to give to this cause, that they know that there's going to be turnabout at some point, and the well's only so deep. Trey adds to that, especially in Tulsa, people will point you to other options you may have considered before. I might miss something there. Let's see.
I think
Andrea, I see. Yeah. So talk about donor fatigue first, and then I'll read Andrea's thought here.
Sure. I think you can combat donor fatigue by really talking, you know, reminding, and I didn't bring this up, you know, we try to give 8 to 12 touch points a year to our donors, whether it's a thank you note, whether it's a tax letter, whether it's phone call, whether it's running into, you know, wherever, you know, recognizing them at a different event, whatever the case may be. So that helps, but you can really help combat donor fatigue by speaking to the outcomes. You make it about the donor. It's not always about you. So you really need to be focused on the outcomes. And we'll talk about that here in a second with the ask. But that, I think, and what I've seen really helps, you know, that monthly update, the quarterly update, hey, just want to let you know that, you know, we've been able to take, you know, 25 kids in this after school program because of the donation you made. And guess what? There were 15 other donors that gave way more than this person, but you know what? They gave 500, and that's all they could give. And I mean, I gave an undisclosed amount to Leadership Tulsa, and you know what? That's all I could give at the time. But you know, it's always appreciated when you can hear about the outcomes of what you're doing. So I think that helps with donor fatigue. We hear a bunch from donors that, hey, we're not, you know, we're starting to hear sometimes that, hey, if we funded someone for more than 3 years, we're giving them a year off. And so that's okay for them to kind of diversify their giving. And so we know that, okay, great. We know when that budget is and when that grant's due or whatever the case may be. And we'll come back to them and continue that cultivation process in a new and different way. So Trey, I hope that answered your question. And my other point was along the budget lines, what we're hearing a lot from foundations, and this is another important question to ask, is well, especially from foundations, is finding out if they're gifting monthly, quarterly, you know, by year, whatever. So it used to be that foundations would gift once a year and then all their money would be spent a lot. And there were probably exceptions to the case, of course, but I've really seen this vast transformation from corporate and from, you know, corporate foundations like a Cox Communications type foundation, or, you know, a foundation in Tulsa like the Zeros, let's say, that they're now giving multiple times a year so that they can meet the needs of the community in a better way. And they don't maybe have to say no, they can consider some things. So if you get that no that first time and you're thinking, well, I'll just wait again until January. Well, you may not have to. So ask that question. I think that's really important. So find out about the budget, find out when they're funding, if they're a foundation or they have a foundation through their corporation. So those are really important things. So, all right, I'm done here. Is there any other questions, Wendy, you're seeing? Or
It's not a question, but Andrea had a great suggestion, which is as you're visiting with supporters, ask them who else you should be talking to, because sometimes foundations can point you to other foundations with shared interests. Same with companies. And Madison says she's seen a biggest shift in foundations going off their funding schedule due to giving the highest need in response to COVID. So yes, our foundations in Tulsa have been amazing as far as trying to respond in a timely way to immediate needs. So that's very cool.
Yeah, I mentioned this in our focus group that we did the other day, Wendy, but we should all count ourselves very lucky to be in Tulsa and be in Oklahoma for that matter. I mean, our philanthropic community is amazing. And I'll tell you this too, when you're scared of making the ask, I've heard this from multiple people as I approach them about new fund. I mean, and Trey, back to your thing about donor fatigue, fine. Donors are going to say no. You got to fill the pipeline. And if you're not filling the pipeline with new and different business, then yes, you're going to be very dependent upon those donations the same every year. If you only knock on the same 20 doors, you're going to be in trouble when that $25,000 gift, which may be a substantial gift for your organization, falls through. So it's about having that pipeline filled. And what I'm hearing from funders is, yeah, we haven't received that many grant requests in January. I'm like, well, hey, let me step in and make that, not a problem for you. And we're getting in, with new grants. You just never know what's happening. You're assuming that everyone is asking these people for money, but maybe not. And I've definitely learned that here in the last few months. So thank you. All right. So the ask, the hard part. So again, just to reiterate what I said earlier, if you're taking care of that cultivation in a thoughtful way, and you're listening and you're connecting the dots and you're customizing, you're going to be able to find some inroads with funders or with corporations that will really help you with the ask, because they're going to, when you come back with, oh, we're not doing events, and then you come back to them in that second meeting and you're talking, oh, hey, we really would like for you to support our one event coming up in April. And they're like, dude, I told you we're not doing events. So, you really need to be listening and be cultivating in a way that allows you to have the ask be easy. You know what they're focused on. You know that your organization does a little bit of that. You stretch the boundary a little bit, which I try to do sometimes, like, oh, this applies to this, go sell that. But, you don't have to be a great salesperson to make the ask. You don't have to be a professional fundraiser. Again, people give to people. And if you have a relationship and you can tie that mission to, their passions, you're going to find, that vehicle that brings them forward. So, and this is something we try to provide to our board at the center. But if you don't get this, you might want to ask for it. And I'll be honest, it's come from us as a staff because it's been asked for. We need talking points. We need that elevator pitch. We need, so our board is telling us what they need. And sometimes you might just need to ask, like, what do you need to help us in fundraising? We need training. Well, great. I know this awesome person named Rob Gardenhire at the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits, but find the training, bring in a salesperson, to do some training for you. It doesn't have to be a nonprofit person, just to get this. And we're talking about one slide here about how to make the ask and how to get there. But have that 1 to 2 sentences where you can really just nail the pitch, and you don't have to go on and on and on.
Rob, can I share a story about a really successful fundraising effort I was involved with when I was on the board of Clare House?
Yeah, go ahead.
Goes to having a really clear purpose and a compelling story. So when we first opened Clare House, we opened up in some rented apartments, and we opened up with 3 bedrooms. And Clare House is a end-of-life hospice home. And we immediately had a waiting list. And an apartment came open right next to us. And as the board, we were also 100% charitable giving. We had no earned income at all. So it was kind of scary. And so we did some figuring, and we figured out what it would cost us to rent and staff that extra space for 6 months or something. We came up with a figure of $150,000, and we sent a letter out, a fundraising appeal, and we had some major gifts in that, but also some smaller gifts, saying if we can raise $150,000, we can double the number of beds we have and take care of this waiting list. And it's the fastest I've ever seen money come in as a staff or a board person, because the purpose was so clear and the dollar amount was so clear.
Yeah, no, 100%. Anytime you can make it tangible, right? It really, I like EIS does a great job, right, of getting the $100 out of you at the end of the night when they're like, this will give diapers to somebody for. I always am a sucker for that one. But no, and then again, I've talked about it, but the impact you have to have, and this goes into your story, the impact that your organization is making in the community is so important. You need to show the impact. So that can help with donor fatigue. It can help with acquiring new donors. I mean, you're telling them, you are showing them what their dollars can do for you. Like we're honestly working on this right now. I'm developing a kind of a marketing sales sheet, as it were, that says what 500, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 does for us, because we're kind of a weird nonprofit. We don't save puppies, right? We don't put diapers in people's hands. I don't, sometimes I don't think people know exactly what we do. And so we're trying to really spell it out for them that would just, I do it with the smaller donations because that's easy. With just $50, you can sponsor a student member to the center, right? But when it becomes to those larger things, what can we really do? And we're talking about big things too, like, we need to add staff to this. We need to add technology. We need to do these things, and your money can really impact that. So talk about what that impact is for your organization. It's a little wonkier for us, but it's there. And then create the story. And the story, I've got just 3 simple steps stolen from a presentation that I was a part of, but it's true. We all love to tell stories. It's a lot easier than going in and handing someone a sales sheet or a one-sheeter and being like, so will you give to the XYZ? You need to tell that story. And part of that story, so have a couple that get handed to you from the organization. But part of that story is about the impact, and it is a specific, tangible example of what is happening. So if that's an individual telling their story, and you go in with a one-sheeter that they're at the bottom of, and you just say, hey, look, Jim, I know we've been talking about this for a long time, but the work that we're doing can be seen in Gerald's story at the bottom of this sheet I've just handed you. Gerald came to us and did this, et cetera, et cetera. And it's quick, it's easy, and what I always try to get out is, well, how can I help? And if the donor will say that to me, then I'm in a good spot. Or you just have to say, would you consider, I think this is an important phrase, would you consider supporting the work that we're doing to impact people like Gerald? And it's a real easy ask, right? You're not saying, can I have some money? You're saying, would you consider supporting, could we count on you to support us this month with a gift, or whatever the case may be. But I think that would you consider is really an easy way to smooth over the ask. So, well, the last phase here is really just, kind of recapping, or the last slide, I should say, if it'll work. It's just recapping kind of everything that we talked about how you can be involved and what you can do. And I mean, you would think I created this out of the chat. I mean, you guys have given a bunch of these. So
what's so inspiring about something like this is you do pick up good ideas from other people, and you can apply them in fresh ways in your own organizations. I love this slide. Great. So do we have any questions? We have about 5 more minutes. You have put them in the chat or unmute yourself. Give it a minute.
See, I did such a good job, Wendy. I did such a good.
That's crazy. Yeah.
No,
Well, this is a wonderful primer into nonprofit fundraising. And I think you're smart to mention that it is a kind of akin to a marketing job. And so the skills that we have from our business life are very replicable in our nonprofit life. And if we approach it like, what's the message? What's the audience for the message? What are the best ways to get this message across to others? Then the board can collaborate with the staff in a way that will be successful. So we're getting lots of nice little thoughts. I will take this recording, and Rob, I think you're going to send me your slides, and sometime tomorrow or the next day at the latest, I'll get it out to everyone. If you are here because this is a required training for your board internship, as part of that email I send out, there'll be that link for the participation survey that will just give you credit for having participated. It's got an opportunity to say something you've learned, and also if there's any way we can improve for the future. So Rob, thank you so much for being.
Yeah. No, Wendy, thank you. This is awesome. I mean, I'm happy to do it anytime.
Final word, if they want to learn more about fundraising from the Oklahoma Center for Nonprofits, how do they access your class list?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is okcmp.org. I'll put that in there, but go under trainings and then just click on that and hit search. And we have fundraising 2 coming up, which you would need to have had fundraising 1, but it's all about stewardship. But we do offer fundraising 1 again coming up. We have some social media club, and we have a ton of different things going on all the time. So yeah, just head to our website, click on training, and you'll see a big list of everything we have going on. And if you're not already involved in our sector calls on Wednesday, these are free calls. You can register for those under events on our website, and they are 10 to 11 a.m. every Wednesday. This week we're going to be focused on mental health with the CEO of Zach Zykoff or something like that. Sorry, I can't remember his name off the top of my head. With Healthy Minds, and so
yeah, Zach.
That's another great. I should know. I've never met him. They office in our office.
Yeah.
Stoikov. Thank you, Andrea. Andrea and Clay for the save.
Yeah.
But no, but those are other great ways to just hear about what's going on in our world, and we always share a number of different resources there, and those are totally free to everybody. But if you're not a member of the center, I mean, you guys don't necessarily work for nonprofits, but certainly get engaged with us, find out how you can plug in. We're offering a ton of free resources all the time.
Thank you. And I would like to thank our sponsor for this series, who is ONEOK Foundation. So thank you to them and to our partners with the Junior League of Tulsa and the Tulsa's Young Professionals. We're making Tulsa stronger, one leader and one nonprofit at a time. So thank you all for being here, and have a great rest of your day.